Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World, and here are the key headlines. US President Donald Trump has called on House Republicans to support releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, reversing his previous opposition. The House is expected to vote on making the documents public, which could include records on Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and others. Donald Trump has stated that he could authorize U.S. military strikes in Mexico if needed to combat drug cartels. He has emphasized his tough stance on stopping illegal drug flow, though it's unclear if such action will be taken. Trump has stated that he would approve legislation imposing sanctions on countries trading with Russia as long as he retains ultimate control. Lawmakers have backed the bill while the White House continues efforts to negotiate to bring an end to the war. A Russian missile strike has killed one in Kharkiv's Berestyn and wounded at least 9 people. Meanwhile, Russia says its air defenses shot down 31 Ukrainian drones overnight. Meanwhile, in Donetsk, Ukrainian attacks hit 2 power stations, causing widespread outages. Donald Trump celebrated the UN Security Council's vote backing his Gaza peace plan with 30 nations in favor and no vetoes. The plan calls for establishing a board of peace with global leaders and an international stabilization force. Trump has stated he plans to approve Saudi Arabia's request to buy up to 48 US-made F-35 fighter jets, a potential multi-billion-dollar deal ahead of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. North Korea has slammed the US-South Korea fact sheet as confrontational, warning of countermeasures. Kim Jong-un criticized Seoul's nuclear submarine plans and alleged US control over the region. Meanwhile, South Korea stressed it has no hostile intent towards the North. Japan has warned citizens in China to heighten safety as Taiwan-related tensions spike, citing rising anti-Japan sentiment. The embassy in Beijing has urged avoiding crowds and staying alert. Meanwhile, the US has withdrawn a missile system from Japan as the Beijing-Tokyo dispute deepens. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump has indicated that he would be open to authorizing US military strikes on Mexican soil if necessary to combat drug cartels. During a press briefing at the White House, Trump responded to a reporter's question about taking military action. This highlights his strong stance on combating the flow of illegal drugs into the United States, though it remains unclear whether such actions would be pursued. Listen in.
Would I launch strikes in Mexico to stop drugs? It's okay with me. Whatever we have to do to stop drugs. Mexico is, look, I looked at Mexico City over the weekend. There's some big problems over there. If we had to, would we do there what we've done to the waterways? You know, there's almost no drugs coming in through our waterways anymore.
Then, of course, we've heard what Donald Trump has had to say. He has, in fact, stated that he is open to carrying out strikes in Mexico in order to curb the flow of illegal drugs, the transnational shipment of drugs. Of course, it's not clear yet whether he would do so and how Mexico would respond to this as well. But as of now, this is a fresh statement that has come in from Donald Trump. He was, of course, speaking at a press briefing at the White House. A reporter had asked him about taking possible military action. We do know what's taking place in Venezuela, off its coast, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific as well. There have already been numerous strikes on certain boats. More than 70 people have now been killed in these strikes. The U.S. maintains that it's doing so in order to combat the drug menace, the shipment of drugs, specifically cocaine, from Latin American countries into its soil. This, of course, has not gone down well with Venezuela as well as neighboring Colombia. With us on the broadcast is Professor Madhav Nalapad, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. As I mentioned earlier, we've already seen certain strikes take place in the Caribbean, in the Pacific as well, with regards to the US's position to combat the flow of drugs into the United States of America. Trump now stating that he is open to taking military action in Mexico as well. Is it likely that he's going to follow through with this statement?
Look, I would doubt it. Mexico is a border state with the United States. Mexico has got immense soft power in the United States as a consequence of a very vibrant Mexican American community. And I would frankly feel that although Trump may want to do it, I hope that cooler minds will prevail on him in his administration and prevent this from happening. Because should it happen, it would create a real crisis in the northern hemisphere, and a real crisis involving one of America's closest commercial and security partners. President Gloria Sheinbaum is doing her best, and I think Trump should help her, and Trump should not try and become a kind of a regional policeman, in fact, a global policeman. I thought, from his campaign declarations that this is the last thing he wanted to do, but it seems now he's been trying to don the garb of a global policeman. So very honestly, I would say it would be extremely unwise as part of President Trump to launch strikes on Mexican territory, whether sea space or land space or air space, and I do hope that he will not do so. Thank you.
Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some crucial updates, this time from within Mexico. We're now learning that Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has now blamed the opposition politicians as well as violent groups and an international social media campaign for the recent protests against her government, which has resulted in over 100 injuries in clashes that took place outside the National Palace. Now, during a conference, Sheinbaum stated that her government is not going to fall for the provocation, dismissing the protests as orchestrated deliberately in order to destabilize her administration. The unrest has, of course, come amid ongoing political tensions in Mexico, with critics accusing her government of failing to address key issues. Listen in.
La gran mayoría de los que marcharon el sábado no eran jóvenes de la generación Z. Sí había algunos jóvenes, pero la mayoría no eran jóvenes. Vimos caras muy conocidas de los que marcharon con la marea rosa. No vamos a caer en la provocación. Las y los mexicanos no quieren la violencia. Bueno, una supuesta marcha que llama contra la violencia y utiliza la violencia. Entonces no vamos a caer en la provocación. No se debe caer en la provocación. Porque lo que buscan es estas imágenes de represión.
Right, there of course we've seen these clashes take place earlier. These are certain Generation Z style protests that gained momentum in the city, especially amid rising anger over certain high profile killings that have taken place. The most recent inclusion to the contentious pool was the 1st November assassination of Carlos Albertos Manzo Rodriguez, the mayor of Uruapan in Michoacan state. Of course, the protests, as the security chief of Mexico City had to state, protests started out peacefully, but a group of hooded individuals began to commit acts of violence. Of course, you can see in those visuals over there, the National Palace was also stormed, where Sheinbaum lives. In fact, the protesters, the demonstrators had torn down the metal fences around the National Palace. They ended up clashing with riot police as well. The police then resorted to deploying tear gas, making matters even worse. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to more developments coming in. We're now learning that US President Donald Trump has emphasized his desire to knock out drug factories while keeping options open for further actions. He's mentioned that he supports an aggressive action against drug cartels and narcotics production in Colombia. Listen in.
We have nobody coming in through our southern border. but we know exactly how they get their things here, how they get the drugs here, fentanyl, cocaine. Colombia has cocaine factories where they make cocaine. Would I knock out those factories? I would be proud to do it personally. I didn't say I'm doing it, but I would be proud to do it because we're going to save millions of lives by doing it.
Shifting focus away from what's taking place in the Americas to what's happening in the United Kingdom. Britain has now stated that it would make refugee status temporary and speed up the deportation of those who arrive illegally. In what the centre-left Labour government says is the most sweeping asylum policy overhaul of modern times, British Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has announced changes that include quadrupling to 20 years the time refugees will have to wait to settle permanently. The government has also threatened visa bans on Angola, Namibia and the Democratic Republic of Congo unless those countries accepted the return of illegal migrants and criminals. Mahmood has outlined changes to how the European Convention on Human Rights should be interpreted by UK courts to give the government greater control over who can remain in Britain. Listen in to what she had to say.
Outside of the most exceptional circumstances, family reunion will not be possible, with a refugee only able to bring family over if they have joined a work and study route and if qualifying tests are met. We will now also remove the 2005 legislation that created a duty to support asylum seekers, reverting to a legal power to do so instead. While we will continue to support those who play by the rules, those who do not, be that through criminality or antisocial behaviour, can have their support removed. We will also remove our duty to support those who have a right to work. It is right that those who do receive support pay for it if they can. So those with income or assets will have to contribute to the cost.
Let's in fact take a look at what basically is under the new plan as Shabana Mahmood has outlined over there. The UK's golden ticket for asylum seekers will be ending soon. Mahmood is due to lay out the policy and of course apart from this the refugee status period will also be reduced. Currently people get refugee status for 5 years, after which they can apply for indefinite leave to remain and eventually citizenship. However, she has stated that the ministry would cut the length of refugee status to 30 months and that protection will be regularly reviewed and refugees will be forced to return to their home countries once they are deemed safe. The ministry has also stated that it intends to make those refugees who are granted asylum wait 20 years before applying to be allowed to live in the UK long term. Of course, asylum claims in Britain are at a record high. Polls suggest that immigration has overtaken the economy as a top concern that voters have. In fact, some 109,343 people claimed asylum in the United Kingdom in the year ending March 2025. This is a 17-year rise in the previous year, 6% above the 2002 peak for 103,081. Meanwhile, the new laws would make it less attractive for irregular refugees. The Home Office has stated that the reforms would make it less attractive for the irregular migrants and refugees to come to the UK and make it easier to remove those already in the country. A statutory legal duty to provide support to asylum seekers introduced in a 2005 law would also be revoked. This basically means that housing, weekly financial allowances would no longer be guaranteed for asylum seekers. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Shruti Das-Gupta, Foreign Affairs expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. I, of course, tried to put all the pieces together of what exactly does this particular overhaul consist of. But what are the implications for the United Kingdom, particularly the political landscape? So far, we've been seeing it's the Tories who've been raising this issue rather vociferously, and now it seems the Labour government is buckling under pressure to act on this front.
You're absolutely right, because they are all looking at immigration as a particularly difficult problem at the hands of UK because of the previous Liberal governments and their policies. let's look at a few numbers to kind of clarify all of this beyond the numbers that you shared of the number of the spikes in the number of refugees seeking asylum in UK. Its population today is mentioned in 2024 was mentioned about 69 million. And last year, on the previous year, 2023, was 68 million. So that is a rise in 1 million in a year. That itself is not supported by its very low birth rate. The birth rate of UK is 1.44, which is below the population replacement rate. So basically, UK is facing a problem of its own citizens being replaced by asylum seekers. And soon, if I look at today, like UK has in 2021, white British UK people were about 81%. In 2011, this percentage was 86%. So a population demographic change is happening in UK thanks to these policies of asylum seeking. They have been exploited by the people who are claiming asylum in UK to like right of family life, right of asylum seeking, and many other smaller articles of those particular policies to ensure that they live a very healthy, happy life while away from the zones of conflict that they claim they have sought asylum from. So what this now problem is that maybe the problem in those particular zones are solved, but the people who sought asylum are still now part of UK's system and they are supported by the government. They need not work. So there are a lot of problems that UK, with a low GDP, with low birth rates, with a population replacement rate that is happening at an alarming level, is facing a moral dilemma of how to ensure that its goodwill is not exploited in the name of asylum seeking. So the numbers that we have looked at shows that there is definitely a problem at hand. Whether it was the Conservatives who were kind of talking about it earlier, and now we have the Labour government talking about it, there are definitely a lot of people who are thinking on how to raise problems. The last time Rishi Sunak tried to end the population replacement game and the immigration problem through its Rwanda plan, the UK lost 700 million euros, if I'm not wrong, because they had to pay Rwanda to build those asylum centers, which are never used. In fact, as of March 2025, Rwanda is demanding more money for the amount that they have spent on building those centers, and it was part of the document signed by these two nations that UK will fund it. So there is a lot that UK is bleeding in the name of giving asylum and refuge, and a lot of people are misusing it and are happily sitting on state-funded livelihoods rather than going and being part of an active community, contributing to UK economy and being an asset to the nation that has given them asylum.
Absolutely, ma'am. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other very crucial developments. We're now learning that the United Nations is calling Bangladesh's recent court ruling an important moment for victims after ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was found guilty on 3 counts, including incitement, ordering killings and failing to prevent atrocities during last year's anti-government uprising. A UN report estimates that up to 1,400 people were killed and thousands more were wounded during the demonstrations. Hasina, who fled to neighbouring India in August 2024, was sentenced to death in absentia at the conclusion of a months-long trial. Listen in to what was said.
The handing down of verdicts today by the International Crimes Tribunal against Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the former Home Minister on charges of crimes against humanity is an important moment for the victims of grave human rights violations committed during the suppression of protests last year. While we were not privy to the conduct of this trial, we have consistently advocated for all accountability proceedings, especially on charges of international crimes, to unquestionably meet international standards of due process and fair trial. This is particularly vital when, as was the case here, the trials have been conducted in absentia and led to a capital punishment sentence. We also regret the imposition of the death penalty, which we oppose in all circumstances.
All right, that, of course, statement by the United Nations stating that it's an important moment for the victims, but also stating that while it's not privy to the conduct of the trial, capital punishment was given in absentia, and it opposes the death penalty, which is, of course, its regular stance. Still with us on the broadcast is Ms. Shruti Dasgupta, Foreign Affairs expert. I want to understand for you, what does this this verdict, not just this verdict, but also what happened in the run-up to it, as well as what's now happening in Bangladesh today, tell us about where the country is now heading towards.
Well, right now, Bangladesh is under lockdown. There have been riots in various parts. Hasina's party members, or at least former party members and supporters, are on the roads and they are protesting against the verdict. So that just shows that Hasina is probably not as unpopular as the Yunus regime would like to paint her to be. That is one of the things that we are knowing about Bangladesh. What happened yesterday was a travesty of law. Why? Because the ICT tribunal, which was formed under the 1973 law by Bangladesh, which was kept in abeyance till 2009, and then when it was reinstated in 2012, there was a particular amendment that was made to this that stated that in absentia, this court of law will not function. So the very fact that they did a trial on her and the Home Minister in absentia is a violation of the ICT tribunal's policies itself. So I understand that this particular tribunal is illegal by the Constitution of Bangladesh itself. This cannot be amended by Yunus regime. It cannot be ignored by Yunus regime because it is an interim government. It does not have the people's verdict to change the law. And even if it is wanting to change the law, they will have to run an election, win public mandate, come to power, run any changes they want to make to this particular law or constitution via both houses of government, and then they can probably run a case on her in absentia so that they can give her a verdict. So the verdict in itself is null and void according to the law of Bangladesh and under which the ICT tribunal functions. The verdict they passed was of death penalty, which is of course another extreme of the other side. What was happening on the day that this verdict was passed? The Yunus regime themselves had declared a shoot-on-sight order for people who were protesting in favor of Sheikh Hasina. This was something similar to what Sheikh Hasina did about a year back when she issued orders that led to the death and injury of so many people. So sometimes when you're in power and you want to hold on to power, you pass edicts that end up in loss of life. And that is regrettable, and people should be held accountable. But not the way Yunus regime has done it, not the way the student government has done it. They have violated the very principles of the constitution that they promised to uphold. They have not been able to bring peace and prosperity to Bangladesh. And I do not think that the upcoming elections in 2026 February would be held peacefully, because Awami League is still on the roads and streets demanding its right to be recognized as a party, which it was banned immediately after Yunus came to power in Bangladesh. And so they want their political entity to be recognized. They want to be able to fight elections and show to the world and to the people who have ousted Hasina that Hasina and her supporters are still in majority, and they would rather run the nation the way she did, where it was still a nation profiting and looking like a gem in South Asia, rather than the current regime, which is riddled with problems and is unable to even pay its electricity bills.
Absolutely, ma'am. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, putting all of this into context and sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in, this time from Chile. We're now learning that Chilean residents have expressed mixed opinions ahead of a runoff election that will see them choose between a Communist Party member and an ultra-conservative candidate. With nearly all ballots tallied, Jeanette Jora, the former Labour minister and the first Communist Party member to be a finalist for the Chilean presidency, is holding 27% of the vote versus 24% for the far-right candidate, Jose Antonio Cast, a tight margin that, of course, highlights deep political divisions in the country. Listen in to how Chileans have reacted.
Claro, es que en verdad son los dos muy extremos y la candidata que es Jara, si no me equivoco, también trató de retractarse, como no, ya no soy del Partido Comunista, sino voy a ser de otro partido, y es como no, y el otro es republicano, entonces son como dos extremos igual complicados y a mí que no soy ni de uno ni de otro es súper difícil.
En Chile igual hay todo un tema todavía con el comunismo porque venimos tenemos una historia con eso y yo creo que mucha gente no quiere repetirlo. Aunque sabemos que no es exactamente lo mismo, la experiencia del Partido Comunista en cualquier otro lado del mundo ha sido nefasta y creo que si bien hay gente que todavía cree que pueden funcionar, yo creo que la mayoría de la gente cree que no. Y lo más probable es que la gente se termine decantando más por el lado más conservador porque también hay un tema con la seguridad.
Meanwhile, Zahra has attacked her far-right rival Kast. She has called him an authoritarian figure and has added that he has to settle to show for his 16 years as a member of parliament. Take a look.
Yo encuentro que es una persona autoritaria, que es una persona que denota al que piensa distinto, que es una persona que estuvo 16 años en la Cámara de Diputados y no se conoce ninguna ley en la cual Chile haya logrado avanzar y que su estilo es oponerse a todo y que como yo sí he estado en gobierno sé que otra cosa es con guitarra, ¿no?
In other news, a powerful atmospheric river has swept through California, leaving at least 6 dead and causing widespread damage. Thunderstorms continue in Los Angeles County, raising mudslide risks, especially in areas recently hit by wildfires. In Atladena, a vehicle was crushed under a fallen tree while a gas station canopy collapsed in San Diego. Near Palm Springs, meanwhile, cars were trapped in mud and firefighters rescued a man stranded above a channel in Buena Park. The National Weather Service in the United States has issued warnings of flash floods and mudslides, urging residents in fire-affected areas to stay alert. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this particular bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.